Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this third talk in our colloquium series on sustainable agriculture. And the two of us are really very pleased to have with us today Mr. Bharat Mansata. And I came to know about his work only a couple of years back, but have been so excited to learn about this person who's devoted his life to environmental activism. And a lot of his work has been in the area of ecological regeneration. And he's the author of several books, including one which is called The Vision of Natural Farming and the Organic Revolution. He has followed the life and work of Bhaskar Save. And in fact, he's going to be telling us a lot about Bhaskar Save and his natural farming methods today. And Bharat has also been very involved with Earth Care books, and along with some friends and associates, he has started this farm called Vanvadi. And he will speak to us today at length, and it has a lot of different natural farming practices, and there are many benefits to the environment, and he will speak to us in detail. So please feel free to ask him questions as we go along. Today he's going to, and he's also been involved with this Bharat Beet Swaraj Manch, India's Seed Sovereignty Alliance. Today he's going to speak to us primarily about two main aspects. One is regarding Bhaskar Save, his work, his life, and his contributions. And he will also tell us about Vanvadi and his experience in setting up his farm along with some friends, the kinds of principles they agreed upon, what their challenges were, what their successes are, and what he thinks the lessons from this experience, what it can teach the rest of us about sustainable agriculture in India and elsewhere. So it's over to you, Bharat.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, and hello to everyone present. I should maybe begin my talk with sharing my journey right from the beginning. I first got interested in natural farming by reading a book by this remarkable Japanese philosopher, farmer, scientist, an outstanding farmer. The book is called One Straw Revolution, The One Straw Revolution. It was translated into English by Larry Corn, and soon after it got translated into English, it got translated into many languages all over the world. In India, it got translated into half a dozen languages. I read the book around 84, 85. Around that time, my wife and I had started a bookstore in Calcutta. It was called Classic Books, and then we renamed ourselves Earth Care Books. We were also into natural health, because I find, there are parallels between the soil and the human body. It's a complex interactive system, within and without. So the body with all its organs, and the soil with all the various systems that exist in it. So the book One Straw Revolution had a lasting impression on me, and till this date, I think in a way it changed my life. Around 1987, I did a workshop, actually a 10-day intensive course in permaculture with Bill Mollison. It was his first course in India. I edited for a while, for a year or so, a year or two, the Permaculture India newsletter. And at that time, I started looking around more carefully at, outstanding farmers. And Bhaskar Save was a name I heard from, several sources. So he was at the top of my list. And I visited his farm. It was before that, soon after the workshop with Bill Mollison, Fukuoka came to India in January 1988. He was invited here to receive what is called the Deshikotam Award this was bestowed on him at Shantiniketan University, Rabindranath Tagore's University, Vishwabharati at Shantiniketan, and given by the Prime Minister. And a friend of mine translated for him at that function. Soon after that visit, after the award, he came to Calcutta, and we had a half-day discussion session outside Earthcare Books. And you know, I got deeper and deeper and deeper into this remarkable way of thinking. I did this course with Bill Mollison. I started editing the newspapers. Then I met Bhaskar Save. This was around 1988. And, you know, truly a very remarkable man, very warm, very friendly, very enthusiastic, you know, very eager to share his understanding, his knowledge about farming. And, you know, like one of the first things he said, who planted the ancient natural orchards, who sowed seed, who tilled the land, you know, who provided manure, irrigation, or protection from pests. And yet, it is the most remarkable, successful with huge amount of, you know, biodensity, biodiversity, integrated systems, providing an enormous amount of everything we need. If I go back to Bhaskar Save, you know, he often tells people who visit him, you know, that if you look out at night and see, you know, the millions of stars in the sky, it's a massive cosmic ocean out there, but it's only on Earth that, you know, we have life. You know, he said that this Earth was a flaming ball of fire broken away from the sun. It took millions of years for it to cool down, and now many millions of years again, you know, for a little tiny bit of soil to form, to rain to form, and all these creatures to form. And it's only on this Earth that we have this amazing diversity of life, you know, all over the place, and all born from the living soil. So he says that, he explains it this way, that this orchestra of nature, if you would like to call it, you know, with all the various creatures of the plant kingdom, you know, the birds, the animal kingdoms, the insects and microorganisms, air, water, soil. This works as an integrated whole. It receives sunlight. The sunlight is through photosynthesis, the green plant matter capture that. The plant leaves fall to the ground. They decompose and they become soil. And in the soil you have, you know, millions of different creatures living in the soil. They eat that. They live there. They go burrowing up and down in the air, and it makes the soil really porous and absorbent. It will absorb air, it will hold air, it will hold moisture. And the insects and the soil-dwelling creatures and microorganisms convert all the organic matter, the leaf litter that falls into the ground, into wonderful fertile soil with a lot of interparticulate spaces for the roots to breathe, for the soil to absorb moisture, and the plants to take that moisture, and they grow. And so he says there are 6 paribals. He calls it paribals. You know, 6 major factors of life. You know, there's soil, water, air, and on the one side, and then there are 3 orders of life. You know, the plant kingdom, the insects and microorganisms, and then the animal kingdom. He says all these 6 remain in constant interaction, and it's a grand symphony which is created out of this, you know, with new being born and lots of life. It's worlds within worlds. So, you know, there's another quote which he often used to tell us, you know, about this magical wholeness with enormous amount of diversity. I think it's a quote from one of the Upanishads. It says, Om Purna Madaha, Purna Midam, Purnat, Purnam Madachate. This creation is whole and complete. From this whole and complete creation emerge, so many other worlds and creations, and each of them are whole and complete, and the saying goes on. He says, take from the whole as many times as you need, respectfully, and the whole will yet remain undiminished, complete. So you have in the forest, he says, that there's so many fruit-bearing trees in the food-bearing trees in the forest. The trees don't move anywhere. Nature provides all their needs right where they are. The air, the moisture, the soil nutrients, everything. And the soil takes energy from the sun. It draws from the soil, and it gives you an enormous amount of fruit from a tiny seed. You have a massive trees giving huge amounts of food, a ton, 2 tons of even 3 tons of produce. And many creatures eat of it. What falls on the ground, the earth-dwelling creatures take, the birds take, humans collect from that. And people are taking it away from there as well. But the soil around the tree remains whole and complete. Where does it get its nitrogen, phosphorus, potash? Bhaskar Save asks. He says, our scientists are crazy, They have this blinkered, meddling itch to do something or the other. And, it's out of arrogance, they interfere, but they only end up causing damage. They can never improve on nature. He says it's only the ignorance of man that that it tries to increase nature's productivity when it is phenomenally productive on its own. He says all we humans have to do is to maintain the natural optimal conditions, and nature will take care of productivity. A grain of rice multiplies 1,000-fold in a few months. So where is the question when nature is so super abundant and generous in providing to us? And we try to, get more and more and more. And, we take from, if we gain in one level, we lose much more somewhere else, So you get into monocultures and you lose the huge amount of biomass which is being generated by nature, which is going back to the soil, the diversity of produce. And you as a result, you've got maybe one produce which you have in larger quantity, which you have grown for the market from a purely money angle, but you have nowhere at all improved on nature, neither the nature's qualities, nor its capacity to yield abundantly in the right optimal conditions. And we progressively go around further degrading these conditions. We add this chemical fertilizers. They even something like urea. You put it on an earthworm. It'll start shuddering. Like a grain of salt. So it's poison. It does have an immediate effect on the organic life of the soil, and the organic life of the soil is very critical, because the plant needs, which Bhaskar Save explains, wonderfully, is that we are under the mistaken impression that plants need to absorb lots of nutrients from the soil. He says that's not true. Plants are mitahari. They are really very small consumers of the mineral nutrients in the soil. And he gives a very convincing experiment to demonstrate it. He says, I took 2 seeds, 1 seed of watermelon. I took some soil, weighed the soil, put it in a container, which was also pre-weighed. So I knew exactly what was the weight of the container, what was the weight of the soil. And at the start of monsoon, I put in that seed. And it got nothing else from outside. All it received was rainwater from the skies, and a plant emerged. And from that plant, there was one fruit which was maybe 6 kilos, and another fruit which was maybe 4 kilos of watermelon. And that was the gain of the plant. He harvested the fruit, he weighed the fruit, he took out the plant, he dried the plant, so all the moisture content went. He weighed the plant, and he weighed the soil. And, the soil had lost literally no weight, insignificant amount of weight. This was an experiment which Bhaskar Save did, but which was done, a few hundred years ago by a Flemish physician, essentially proving the same thing. And it shows that, really, though the soil had gained or lost no weight, what it had actually gained was, lots of root fibers left over from the soil, minute particles which had become part of the soil. So the soil had lost some weight, but that weight had got transferred into, what was left over in the root particles in the soil. And scientifically, if they explain, they say, 80% of the nutrients of plants and all organic matter comes from air, about 80-90%, about 44-45% carbon, 44-45% oxygen, there's about 5-6% hydrogen, and the mineral nutrients from the soil constitute barely 5% of the weight of a plant. And for most organic matter, it's true. So he says that we must realize that it's not just all the nutrients in the soil, it is the physical condition of the soil. He emphasizes that the physical condition of the soil is far more important than its chemical composition. So if it is porous and absorbent, there'll be interparticulate spaces to absorb air, to absorb moisture. And when that happens, the real needs, all the other needs of plants, the carbon and the oxygen, and are much better met. So he says, our traditional farmers understood this very well. They say that they had a word for it called WAFSA, WAAFSA in North Indian terminology. I'm sure there may be equivalents of this word in many Indian languages. It is a condition of the soil where the porous soil can absorb, particulate soil can absorb air, can hold moisture in thin films around the particle matter, and there is air, there's moisture, and there's warmth. And this combination of air, moisture, and warmth, this physical condition of the soil, is the ideal condition for excellent plant growth. And so you find this in most of the undisturbed forests and wilderness, which is not tilled, where people have not put in chemicals. Nature's life immediately comes into play. This is where nature's life comes into play. All the soil-dwelling creatures which are maintaining the porosity and the ventilated quality of the soil, all the earthworms, the ants, the microorganisms, so many varieties of soil-dwelling creatures. They live in the soil, they move in the soil, they go up and down in the soil, they return their excrement to the soil, they take plant organic matter and the leftover of other creatures, and they recycle everything back into the soil, making it into rich in nutrients, but also very much keeping the physical quality of the soil, the absorptive conditions of aeration and moisture absorption. So Bhaskar Save says, of prime importance in agriculture is the microclimate of the soil. So the soil must always be covered. There should not be a single bit of bare patch of soil exposed to the direct sun or the direct impact of the wind and rain. Under these conditions, the organic life of the soil-dwelling conditions really prosper, and they are our partners in creating a wonderful soil. Somewhere down the line, our humans, got biophobic. But it's crazy, we have coexisted with an enormous variety of life, including, bacteria, viruses, germs, everything, and all the so many creatures. And they have played a fundamental role the evolution. The kind of thing we really should have a phobia about is chemophobia and radiation phobia and those kinds of things, which nature is not at all used to. It has not really been able to adapt. But all the biological creatures, it has had a long experience of adapting and evolution. And we work as an integrated system. You take the human body. It has so many organs in it, but they function as an integrated whole. And if we fall ill, if we just rest, relax, and follow the laws of nature, keep our digestive system light, the nature heals itself. It is an integrated system. So these are the kinds of things which Bhaskar Save emphasizes. He says, look at nature, observe nature, wonder at nature, have respect for nature. He says nature is God. You just relate to nature, and you really don't have to do anything else. And if we go back in time, just a little bit in time, we millions and billions of years of history. Humans appeared later on Earth, and if you look at the history of farming, is barely 10,000 years old, according to the National Commission of Farmers, chaired by Swaminathan. They put the figure at 10,000 years is the history of farming in India. Dr. Devolde says it's about 12,000 years. I've heard somewhere else saying it's about 15,000 years. So 10,000 to 15,000 years, which is nothing in time, is the period in which humans have been farming. But before that, we evolved to an enormous extent. All the creatures on Earth got from the Earth and returned to the Earth, and they all evolved, as a community, and integrated community, and so did humans. But in 10,000 years, even in those 10,000 years of agricultural history, it's been barely 9,950 years. It's been barely 60 years. Around the mid-60s is when the Green Revolution really took off in India. So we have barely, how much? 60, 70-year-old history of farming. But even before this 10,000-year-old history of farming, humans ate. Bhaskar Save says, apart from humans, nobody has to grow their food, nobody has to cook their food. All the creatures on Earth are happy. And so were humans before farming. According to the Gaia Atlas of Planet Management, edited by Norman Myers, it's a planned book, there are an estimated 80,000 edible species, humanly edible species on Earth. Out of that 80,000 humanly edible species on Earth, according to that book, they say that less than 150 have really been cultivated on a large scale. 150 species of crops, that includes rice, potato, this, that, everything else. That so covers a lot of that. So 150 species of crops have been cultivated on a large scale. And out of that 150 species of crops, only 30 species of crops provide 90% of the human diet. And out of that 30 species of crops, only 8 crops provide 75% of the global human diet. So from 80,000 plant species, we have come down to a situation where 8 plant species are providing 75% of all the food the people of this earth are eating. And we talk about progress and becoming rich. We may have many, many brands in our supermarkets. But, from 80,000 to 8 species, it's 0.01% or whatever is the percentage. It's an impoverishment. Well, we have got into farming. We can't escape from it. We've got into a situation of urbanization, industrialization. We need surplus to go to the cities, and we will have to live with farming. But now we have to learn about what is the most sensible way of farming, which will take us into the future. That's why this series, like sustainable farming, it's a critical thing. Sustainable as something which will be good for, 7, 8, 10, 15 generations into the future, whereas the modern way of farming, within one generation, we are seeing, the hard slaps it has. So everyone from the, Food and Agriculture Organization, from the top, not scientists to the others, they were earlier saying, oh, we have no choice. We have to follow this. We have such a huge expanding population. Now they are saying that if we don't mend our ways, we will be in terrible soup. Next to the climate change study, international study, global warming and climate change study, which was a huge study with people all over the world, the second biggest international study is something called the International Assessment of Agricultural Science and Technology in Development, the IAA-STD. You Google that and you will get some information. There's a summary report of the IAA-STD, and it's, in short, it's also called the World Agriculture Report. And I think the first line says, business as usual is no longer an option. These are the top not scientists. This was a team from all over the world, which had 400 agricultural experts, 1,000 multidisciplinary reviewers, participation of more than 80 countries, the Food and Agriculture Organization, UN, World Bank, FAO, all the top-notch people. They studied it for 4 years, came out with a few thousand pages of a report and condensed into a few pages. And the summary conclusions, they say, is that business as usual is no longer an option. There is no way that we can continue this way of farming. The scientists were telling us there's no way we can change it. How can we feed our population? And now they're saying there's no way that we can continue this. We have to find some other ways. And that's the truth of the matter. The soil is getting degraded. The chemical inputs which we are putting it, they are non-renewable resources. The urea which we consume, a huge amount of that, the raw material is naphtha. 75% of all the fossil fuels in India are imported. 75%, a whopping 75% from the Persian Gulf mostly. All of it flowing through that narrow Strait of Hormuz. One day if Israel bombs Iran, and Iran just chokes that Strait of Hormuz, which is a very, very narrow neck. It doesn't take much to choke that. And, all our oil, 75% of our oil will stop. 40% of the world's oil and 75% of India's oil will stop. The cities will shudder. Even the farmers who have got into chemical farming, they will no longer get this thing. That's one part. The inputs are non-sustainable. They have caused huge amount of damage to the soil. We have huge amount of micronutrient deficiencies by using this thing because it's not holistic. You can't have NPK, just nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. There's so many other, micronutrients which are needed in trace quantities, but vital to impart, various qualities like resistance to pests, excess rainfall, excess or droughts. There's so many qualities. The huge amount of qualities which nature has provided us in the germplasm which she has created is phenomenal. It can sustain us all the way through, but not if we wipe it out, which is what we are doing. So I think I transgressed, from the IASTD report. So what was I saying? Let's go back to Bhaskar Save. We don't want to dwell too much on the idiocy of the last 60, 80, 100 years, where it's civilizational suicide, and it's not going to be easy to change our ways. And people are not changing fast enough. They are realizing, but they're not implementing. Maybe it's half-hearted realization, but we have to wake up. Yeah. So coming back to Bhaskar Save, he says that this we have this gift of nature, and in nature, every single plant, every single leaf, blade of grass, every single tiny little creature that lives in the soil has a role to play. we have no right to harm it, you know. And that's why he says ahimsa is param dharma. Hmm. You know, the non-violence to the creatures of the soil. You know, we think ourselves brilliant, but you know, we have understood very little of nature, and we have not really appreciated how important all those you know, plants are, including those weeds and all, every single insect. So he says ahimsa is a primary fundamental principle of thing. Uh, Geo or Ginedo is the principle which he follows. Live and let live. Minimize violence and intervention in the soil to the absolute bare minimum needed. And that was the same principle which Fukuoka follows. So really, uh, if one defines what is natural farming, it is, it is minimum intervention, uh, biodiverse farming, mixed cropping in harmony with nature. The purest form of natural farming would be do nothing farming, where we do nothing at all. And, and that is how nature provided for us till 10,000 years ago, till 10,000, 12,000, 15,000 years ago. Everything was met by nature, all our food needs and all, every single conceivable need was met by nature, and human we evolved by all the various gifts of nature. Ahimsa param dharma is a rule which he believes in, you know, so minimize intervention, minimize violence. And he says, you know, that the biggest blunder we made was when we started looking at farming as a business. This farming should never be seen as a business. It's a sacred part, you know. When you start looking at business, you know, you don't see the wider picture at all. And you allow a lot of collateral damage happening to happen. Uh, so he says, "Kheti dharma hai, dhanda nahi." It is a sacred path. It's a sacred duty. And if we corrupt our minds and follow it as a purely money-minded thing, you know, we will cause a lot of damage. So we will try to do this and do that to try and improve productivity of the one particular crop, which is giving us a good price in the market. We will defy the law of nature, which is, you know, diversity of plants and creatures living as a community, as an integrated whole and helping each other. All kinds of problems arise by this tunnel vision of money-oriented farming. So you try to do all kinds of things which will improve your money yield. But the most important things which Bhaskar Save says for a farmer to learn is that what are the things which he should never do to fulfill his primary duty of passing on to the next generation this earth, this soil in the same condition that we have received it, or better condition if possible. Putting all these various chemical fertilizers and pesticides in the land, you know, mechanized tillage and monocultures and, you know, high external dependencies and wild fluctuations in market prices, which will lure a farmer to grow a huge amount of something in 1 year, and the next year there'll be such a glut that he gets nothing. He'll have spent enormous amount of money. And so you have a situation where farmer suicides are coming up. And during one of these waves of farmer suicides in Maharashtra, I had visited Bhaskar Save's farm, and he was feeling so sad. He was saying, ours is a Krishi Pradhan Desh. You know, we have taught sustainable farming and given so much to the world on this, and this is the plight we are reduced to. You know, I really feel like writing a very strong letter on this. I said, please do, you know. I said this National Commission on Farmers is on. You know, let's have a series of discussions, and I'll try and draft it and, you know, check it out with you. And so he wrote an open letter to M.S. Swaminathan, the father of India's Green Revolution, who, about a decade ago, maybe around 2004, 2006, was again sharing the national, yeah, okay. Yeah, so this was in January 1988, just tracing my journey. After Fukuoka got the Deshikotam Award, he came to the bookstore and we're having this discussion. And, uh, uh, I fell in love with that man and the subject he was talking about. Yeah. So this is Bhaskar Save, my guru. He passed away a few years ago, but everything I've learned about, ecology, applied ecology as it works in nature. I was a city-bred lad and really understood very little. And then, yeah, but Bhaskar Save would explain to me so nicely in such simple language, that even a child could understand. And slowly, I began to understand more and more. And every time I visited him, I learned something new, we think we can take shortcuts, but the world of nature, the world of farming, the world of Indian music, culture, spiritual, these are oceans, and we really know very little, and it is an incremental learning. So this is Bhaskar Save. Yeah. So here it says, farming is a sacred path, not a business. Here he says that, God is, nature is God, and just relate with her, and really she'll do everything for you. This is the first sign in Bhaskar Save's orchard. As you enter the orchard, you have many of these signs with wonderful, wise, short, pithy sayings. So the first one says, Sahyog hi prakriti ka siddhant. Cooperation is the fundamental law of nature. Yeah. So this is one of the baby calves. He's so wonderful with children, with animals, with everyone, and plants. Yeah. So tilling, there he explains that there are 5 major concerns of farming, tilling, fertility inputs, irrigation, weeds, and pest control. These are the 5 aspects of farming which most farmers are concerned about. He says that tilling is done so wonderfully by nature's creatures if you don't disturb the soil. When you are planting for the very first time, when you're planting either your seeds or seedlings or your saplings in the ground, at that time you might have to loosen the soil and prepare the soil. But once you plant in the soil, then no longer disturb the soil till the plant cycle, crop yielding cycle is completed. And here in an orchard, that means hundreds of years, So the orchard which Bhaskar Save planted, the only time he disturbed the soil was right at the very beginning, 40, 50, 60 years ago. And then he never dug in that area except when he wanted to extend the orchard to a new zone. So just before planting was the only time he loosened the soil, made his pits, made some irrigation channels to minimize, the labor of watering and to allow for drainage of extra water and stuff like that. But after that, he never disturbed the soil. He says that there's so many soil-dwelling creatures which do excellent tilling of the soil. He can speak in for an hour on the earthworm and say, how the earthworm goes, up and down so many times in a cycle of 24 hours, and each time it makes a tunnel going up and down. And there's so many lakh earthworms in 1 acre of regenerated soil, and if each of them are active only for 3 months of the monsoon, going up and down in the air, in the soil, because they come up to get air and they come up to leave the vermicasting, So they come up maybe 10, 20 times in the course of 24 hours. So they make something like 8 crore tunnels in every acre of soil, It's so wonderfully porous, well tilled, So if you let nature do her work, she will do it far better than you will. So earthworms are the natural tillers. Irrigation. This is another principle which Bhaskar Bhai emphasizes very often. He says plants require moisture, not water. It's our ignorance that, we think that we have to give it copious quantities of water. So he says the best conditions of the soil of growth are when the soil is just damp and moist. That is a time when aeration and moisture coexist in the interparticulate spaces of the soil. But if you put in too much of water and you flood it, and you can see a few inches of soil on the water on the surface of the soil, that means all the soil is totally filled with water. The interparticulated spaces between in the soil particles have been totally filled up, and there is no space for any air. Under these conditions, the roots cannot breathe and root rot starts. Bhaskar Save says that even a few hours of flooding of horticultural crops causes enormous damage, and it might take a month or two for the roots to recover. It'll repair itself and regenerate, and then it'll get on to its job of yielding. So he says, drainage is even more important in horticulture than irrigation. But these channels which he has made here have a double function. In the dry months, he provides irrigation to them, because the kind of trees which he has planted are in a sense, he planted it for the market. He brought up his whole family. He gave up his job as a school teacher, and he had to raise his whole family and have monetary needs. So he needed some things by which he could sell to the market. So his main crops, which earn him a lot of money, are coconut and chiku. So you have a lot of coconut and chiku, but both these crops are among the species which need irrigation. There are many others which need very little or no irrigation. You have mango, custard apple, etc., etc., amla, bear, and many of the plants of nature. But his is an irrigated system, and where you see this white arrow there's a trench. It may be 1.5 to 2 feet wide and maybe 9 inches deep. And in the dry months, when there is no rain, he releases water by means of a pipe outlet. He has made tank stations. So all he has to do is unplug in one channel, and water will fill the whole line and irrigate the whole lot of trees. So it becomes an irrigation mechanism. And the other important point he emphasizes is, knowing where to. It's not also not knowing how much it needs, but where it needs it. He says, the ideal place to water is at the outer edge of the canopy. He says that, as far as the canopy of the tree has spread, the underground root system has also spread. And if the underground root system has spread that far, it can very well get its moisture and nutrient needs from the outer edge. So he says, let your channels be near the outer canopy. Of course, as the orchard develops, he changes the position of his trenches 2-3 times over the next 10 years, in a very wonderful way, which has multiple benefits. But yeah, so this trench is also functioning as a drainage channel. It's a very high rainfall zone in Konkan, Maharashtra. We get around 90-100 inches of rain in a period of 3-4 months. And this is a low-lying area. Actually, it was a paddy field. He converted that into a horticultural farm. So drainage is vitally important, and the irrigation trenches function as drainage channels in the monsoon months. So the extra water drains out from the channel and goes into his paddy field, because paddy is a semi-aquatic crop. That extra water there will do no harm. Plus, it's getting all the vermi wash, with all the nutrients going through, and it's highly oxygenated, so it's excellent for the paddy field as well. Okay, yeah. So when to water is another factor. He says as long as there's some dampness in the soil, you don't bother to water. But when the surface of the soil, the top few 6 inches get dry, then there'll be root stress because what you have planted in the ground are young saplings with tiny roots. They can reach maybe 9 inches, 12 inches into the ground. And if that part is dried, it will get into water stress. So he has planted along, and he finds this very useful in particularly a newly planted orchard. These are croton plants. So they are immediate indicators, you know. So as when the moisture level in the soil uh, falls below 9 inches and the upper 9 inches of the soil begin to dry, the leaves will start drooping as you see on the left. And the moment you water, the leaves all perk up, you know. So it's an immediate water indicator. Okay, my baby trees are getting water stressed. Let me now give watering, some irrigation. Yeah. Food for the soil, you know. So he says that, you know, if a farmer, he says about 5 to 15% of the yield of any food crop planted by a farmer is the edible matter, you know, the seed and the fruit. The remaining 85 to 95% of the weight of a plant, the biomass, is the dew of the soil. Says nature gave you enough food for you to eat. You consume your 5 to 15% of your fruit or seeds which the plant is getting, and the remaining biomass must all be religiously returned to the soil. And if you do that and you follow mixed cropping, he says the fertility of your soil will never diminish. It will keep on improving, actually. So everything, you know, now these, on your left, you see these dried coconut leaves. Actually, there's a huge market also for these coconut leaves. They're used for thatch, they're used for many different things, from matting and stuff. But he doesn't like selling any of this stuff. He says, let it go back. My coconut is giving me so much. I'm getting so much money. I'm getting so much fruit. Why should I go after some for extra money? This is what came from the coconut. It fell back to the ground. It has all the nutrients for the coconut. Let the coconut draw its nutrients from there again. So it's in situ composting, you know. Most of the leaves where they fall get composted right there. So on your left is the palm, on your right are the other trees. And this will provide excellent food for the soil, which will provide the nutrients needed by that particular variety of plant. So he says in situ composting is far, far superior to, you know, composting anywhere else. You create the right optimal conditions on your ground for nature to do all the composting for you. It'll convert all your organic matter into wonderful humus, nutrient-rich soil, and keep the physical condition, the aerated quality and porosity and moisture absorption of the soil. Yeah. So yeah, the tree give the leaves, flowers, fruits, seeds, branches, etc. You know, the fruits and seeds which are edible we eat, the rest we return to the soil. Weeds. He says, you know, Bhaskar Save says that weeds are a great blessing, you know, in a sense. You know, what are weeds? Weeds are things which have come up on their own, which is not planted by the farmer. You know, there are some conditions where, you know, they become invasive and stubborn and a huge, huge headache. But under normal conditions, you know, there are so many varieties of plants which come up on their own, which perform useful functions in nature and provide also useful yield to human beings. There's so many wild edible weeds. So he says, you know, in this slide that no weeds grow where no sunlight penetrates. So the weeds and the leaf litter and the shade is to protect the soil. And if you don't have shade, if you don't have mulch on the ground, nature will send out its weeds and it will protect the soil, and the soil dwelling creatures will be able to live there. So you should not really worry about weeds. I'll come to that later. Now here he says as long as you know, the weeds remain below the crops. These are just newly planted banana saplings, and you see all lot of weeds growing there. So it says as long as your weeds remain below the crops which you need, you don't have to worry, you know. He says it's only when the weeds overgrow your crops and block out sunlight that they will suffer. So he says that the competition is for sunlight. And if you ensure that your crop remains above the weeds, you don't have to worry about weeding. You don't have to worry about weeds stealing nutrients from the soil. Weeds never come up whose nutrient requirements are less than abundantly provided in the soil. And the same weed, whatever nutrients they've taken from the soil, they're going back to the soil, and they will be available all the time. So that really the nutrient is not lost. Competition is not a factor. Sunlight competition is a factor. If weeds overgrow your crops, you have to cut and mulch and make sure that they remain below your crops. Otherwise, don't be worried about weeds in a horticulture, in an orchard plot, in a tree cropping system especially. And he shows it, he demonstrates it. Yeah. So do nothing farming, no tilling, no weeding, no manure, no crop protection. I'll come to that later, on biological pest control and how, without using any chemicals, he doesn't really have any insect problems. And those farmers who do have some insect problems, he has tips, which maybe we can go into in discussion later on. Yeah. Okay. So this is something which quite a few people may be interested in, because it's practical knowledge which people can apply. Suppose you want to start an organic orchard plot, growing trees. You say, suppose you have a half acre of land or 1 acre of land. He says, when you start an orchard plot, you right at the very start, before the rains, a couple of months before the rains, you prepare the soil and you decide what you want to plant where. And you should have a combination of Alpajivi, Madhyajivi, Dirghajivi. Alpajivi are short lifespan species, Madhyajivi are medium lifespan species, and Dirghajivi are long lifespan species. So here is a photo of various short lifespan species. Anything from 15 days to 1 year. So you have all your vegetables, your grains, your pulses, cereals. Amongst your medium lifespan species, these have a lifespan of anything, say from 2 to 3 years to 12 years. So in this, things like banana and papaya, they would start yielding in about 11, 12 months, and they would continue yielding for at least 2 to 3 years. So it's a medium lifespan species, but then you have other slightly longer living medium lifespan species like custard apple and guava, which would yield for maybe 12, 15 years. So anything from 2, 3 years to 12, 15 years is the medium lifespan species, which you must intercrop amongst your long lifespan species, So long lifespan species, maybe whatever you like, coconut is a long lifespan, 125 years. Mango is a long lifespan, jackfruit, all the so many varieties of big trees are long lifespan species, anything from 50, 100 years to several hundred years. So if you, those are the crops which will keep on yielding for a long time for you. Says, but when you plant those long lifespan crops, you are giving a fair amount of space between them, because they are going to grow into big trees. You're not going to plant them too close. But when you have left some, say, maybe 20, 30 feet between two long lifespan species, maybe between 2 coconuts or 2 mangoes, then you have so much space which is open. He says the farmer must make use of the space to get yield and also to shade the soil and to get so much more biomass. So after getting his yield, all that biomass is going back to the soil. So he plants these Madhyajivi, medium lifespan species, in between his long lifespan species. So if you have say 2 mangoes at 30 feet interval, in between the 2 mangoes at 15-foot interval, he would plant a custard apple, which is a medium lifespan species. And in between that mango and the custard apple, he plants a papaya. So that's 7.5 feet from either side. So it is dense planting. And all the remaining space, he plants with vegetables. He says that if you have no labor, you're doing all the work yourself and you can't really harvest it, because vegetables do need more care compared to your fruit and other species. So if you can't take care of vegetables, let the weeds grow. They will perform the function of your short lifespan species. So to the list of vegetables, grains, and pulses, legumes, you can add weeds as a short lifespan species. Yeah. So this is the position. Maybe some few months after the initial planting, you can see, the coconut, you can see the bananas on the ground, you can see these gourds. He's planted everything all together right at the start of the monsoon, spacing out his long lifespan, medium lifespan, and short lifespan species properly, made his irrigation trenches and channels and drainage channels. And this is the yield which he gets. So he will take his yield from the vegetables, and all the biomass will go back to the soil to enrich the soil. He will continue getting the yields from his bananas here for about 3 years. He'll take all the yield, and all the remaining bioorganic matter will go back to the soil to enrich the soil. And meanwhile, on either side, the longer the medium lifespan is short medium, and the medium. So the banana would be phased out maybe within 2, 3, 5 years or whatever. Then between his two coconuts, he has what is this called the bona coconut, which is the coconut which he uses for drinking water purposes. It has a shorter lifespan than the other coconut. So once the bananas yield, they are cut and mulch, and there's space for the other medium lifespan species to grow. And within 12 to 15 years, they have given their yield. They are also cut and mulch, you have harvested, and there's enough space for the other remaining long lifespan species to cover all your ground, and they've become perfectly self-sufficient. So he says, natural farming, the purest form of natural farming. As you say, if you aspire to the purest form of do nothing natural farming. Now, one of the toughest things which difficulties which farmers face to dispense in our tropical conditions, where we get only 3-4 months of rain in a year, is tillage. It says the need for a tillage. But he says in a horticultural kind of a system like the one which he follows, you do a one-time tillage, and you have grown all these crops which are providing biomass, providing you yield, creating the right conditions for the soil to do its work of tilling. And so then you just never ever have to till again. There was another point I wanted to make, but I don't remember. Okay, yeah. So this is the position of the crops, maybe 6 months after planting, or 9 months after planting. Yeah. So this gives some indication of the spacings. So yeah, between two long lifespan species, he has shown 30 feet distance. Say suppose that is mango on your extreme left and extreme right. Then somewhere in the middle, you can have your custard apple. Right in the middle between the two mangoes, you can have your custard apple. And on either side, you can also have either your bananas or your papayas. So at that time, because you also have to irrigate your bananas, there are more irrigation trenches. And at the edges of the irrigation trenches, you planted the vegetables. The bananas are getting the water. The vegetables are getting the water. All the plants are getting the water. And once the vegetables are harvested, you stop that. Once the bananas are harvested, you mulch it, and then you make a single trench. So the number of trenches halves at every stage, and you're filling up all the old trenches with the biomass of the matter which you are removing. So you're getting excellent soil, porous soil. This is the ideal way for plants to get water is through capillary action. there should be no force feeding. It's not as though the plant has no choice. It is just totally surrounded by water. Ideally, it should be a buffet system where plants help themselves according to their needs. So if their roots are reaching out to the irrigation trenches and the capillary action is there and porous soil, it will take exactly what it needs, and it will never suffer from aeration stress of too much water driving out the air in the interparticulate spaces of the soil. Okay, yeah. So this is the position of the irrigation trenches right at the beginning, you know. So you have them because your saplings are very small. The root system is, maybe 6 inches on either side and maybe 9 inches deep. So you have to provide water close to the sapling which you have planted. But as the plant grows, as I mentioned earlier, as far as the canopy spreads, the roots below also spread. So then you make your irrigation trench further away as the canopy grows. So in three or four stages, then you don't no longer do anything with the ground. You've got a single irrigation channel between 2 rows of big trees, and you never have to do anything with the soil. But these trenches perform a lot of convenience in irrigating. Yeah, so this is also explaining the positioning of the medium lifespan species. Yeah, this is what the orchard look like after a year or 2 years. Okay, so in say maybe in 8 years, or 10, 12, 15 years, your big lifespan species, long lifespan species have matured, and the canopies have spread so that the canopies of each are touching each other, and everything in between has been taken out because there's no sun available there. Then you have a single trench between 2 rows of trees on his farm, which is an irrigated farm. But if we are doing, working on undulating terrain like hilly terrain, or you're working with crops like mango and custard apple, where irrigation is not really needed beyond the second year, then you don't need really these irrigation trenches or drainage channels. But on flat plains, where you're growing crops like coconut and chiku, and irrigation is available, this is the kind of system he would follow. You can do even less, but this is still the bare minimum. He provides water about once in 12-15 days during summer, and maybe once in 7-8 days in winter. It says in winter the air is drier, and so irrigation needs are more, contrary to normal intuitive sense that you need to irrigate more when it's hot and less when it's cold. He says in winter the air is much drier, the humidity is much more in the summer, and organic soil can absorb humidity directly from the air because of all the microorganisms in the earth who are casting the humus in the forest. Nobody goes to irrigate, but it remains evergreen. How? It is the humus in the soil is absorbing humidity directly from the air. So anyway, so I've digressed. This is a mature, fully grown orchard. And now, because we have a lot of shade, if you want to add crops, the only kind of crops you can really add are shade-tolerant crops, which means haldi, turmeric, suran, which is an edible tuber, and alu, it's called in Marathi, also called acacia plant. These are all common species all over India. These are shade-tolerant plants. They will grow even where very little sunlight penetrates. So then he says you can start integrating this. Okay. This is just a tip, yeah. Now the the point I was wanting to make earlier, but I actually slipped out of my mind. He says the kind of natural farming that Fukuoka practiced in Japan. Yeah, so the kind of natural farming which Fukuoka practiced with his crops like, rice, barley, etc., without no tillage, it worked in his conditions. Hmm. He could do an overlapping succession of those crops without having to till the ground. And he had this white clover, and he had a well-distributed rainfall. Uh, and so he could manage to dispense with tillage even with his field crops. But in Indian conditions, where we get monsoon rains concentrated in just 4 months, 3, 4 months of the monsoon, he says it's very tough for farmers to do no tillage farming. He says that kind of no tillage farming, do nothing natural farming, is ideally suited for horticultural tree crops and perennials. Hmm. So, yeah. So he says, a tree sapling, which you newly planted, is like a baby. When it is for a year or 2 years or 3 years, a little bit of help that you give it, attention you give it, uh, uh, would go a long way. Says, even you're walking around it, there's this saying, the footsteps of a farmer are the best fertilizer. But just going around and just walking around, seeing some plants are withering, some problems are there, just minor corrections you do. So he says that with a tree sapling, it's like a child, a baby. Look after it for the first 2, 3 years, then it looks after itself, and then it looks after you. And that is why tree crops, perennial crops, horticultural crops are most amenable to natural farming in tropical conditions like India, compared to various other field crops, especially in our kind of conditions. One can very few people have succeeded on with no-till. There have been people, I won't say they haven't, but very few have succeeded on a large scale with the same level of productivity by doing no tillage farming. So what Bhaskar Save actually says that, I have 10, 12 acres of horticultural orchard crops, and I have 2 acres of my field crops where I grow all my grains and vegetables and pulses and rices all in crop rotation. But my field cropping system is organic. It is traditional organic farming. I don't call it really natural farming, because I do tillage here. When just before planting the seeds, I do tillage at least once or twice a year. Those fields are tilled, but he does, once planting is done, he doesn't disturb the soil any longer, and he doesn't do any of the other disturbances like providing any chemicals going there to weed. So it's very, very close to natural farming, but it is not absolutely pure natural farming, which is also no tillage. Whereas in tree crops, he says, before you planted, you have tilled the land. Yeah, so at that stage, right at the beginning, it's organic. It's not pure no-till natural farming. But after that, you're no longer tilling. Okay, for the first year or two, you're looking after it. You may be providing some manure, fertility, and its mulch, but you are doing something. So it is still a stage of organic farming. But once you pass 2, 3, 4 years of the crop gets 2, 3, 4 years old, it gets into a stage where it is pure natural farming. You really have to do nothing else. If it's an irrigated crop, release moisture when needed, maybe once in 15 days or once in 8 days in the irrigation channels, and only do harvesting. Nothing else at all is needed. So, it's Bhaskar Save in his 80s even. I met him till he passed away at the age of 93, He would go around 80s and even early 90s. He would walk around in the orchard and look after his entire irrigation of the whole farm, and he'd carry the scythe, and if there was a fallen coconut leaf which is slightly fallen far, he would, the scythe, he'd just pull it and mulch it in the right place. And a massive farm like that was largely operated by him, and the main labor was harvesting. Then they would get daily wage workers to come and harvest the chiku. And for that was only for chiku. For coconut, he says there was no harvesting. He believed very much that the nature has created the coconut in such a way, it's given it such a hard shell that even if it falls 40 feet from a height of 40 feet and falls on the ground, nothing at all happens to the seed. A ripe coconut would fall onto the ground. So he says, I don't need to send my thing up. But while it has given protection to the shell, for the tree is so vulnerable that every cut you make on the trunk to climb up a tree, to harvest it, or to tap it for your coconut nira or your toddy or your liquor, those cuts never heal. So he says, why should I injure the soil when the nature has provided so much protection? So he does, even the labor for harvesting his coconut, he has totally dispensed with. Yeah, he has some, what I call the Bona dwarf coconuts, very few. So if I need coconut water to drink, and I'll just pluck from there for the drinking purpose. Otherwise, I'll let the coconut ripen and fall on its own, and all I have to do is just collect it. And so he says, following the principle that, initially you look after the baby. So he does, when he plants the coconut, he creates the right environment for it right at the start. He will make his pit 3 feet deep and 3 feet wide. And right at the bottom, he would put, the residue of coconut, all the, dry branches, leaves, dry coconut shells, up to, 6-9 inches. Then the next layer would be fertile topsoil, which he has dug out from the pit. When you dig out from the pit, all the fertile topsoil you keep on one side and the lower soil you keep on the other. So after putting the lowest layer, you put in the topsoil, then you put the other lower layer mitti, then you put in some cow dung, and right at the top again, you put your topsoil. So this is the layering system he has made for the coconut, and he plants a sapling right there. He says, now, when I've done this, I don't have to worry at all at all ever for the rest of its life. I don't have to give it anything. By the time the root goes down and spreads, it will have got all its needs, and the ground will have become richer and more porous, and I will no longer ever have to do anything else. So this is it is one time labor and effort, but beyond that, it's do nothing. Okay, so not a question may arise, we are talking about orchards and tree crops, and this is a rich man's thing, which is not true. Our field crops are pulses, cereals. They've come in the last 10,000 years. We were consuming so many things, and a lot of it was our tree cropping systems and all the yield which it provided, the perennials which nature provided. Yeah, but forgetting that for a while, given the situation where we have huge acreages of fields where grains and pulses and cereals and all are grown, what is the best form of farming with minimum interference? So Bhaskar Save's quote gives this example of him, of a farmer he visited in 1952 in a very dry area of Gujarat, receiving very little rainfall. And he said that this farmer, he grows 6 crops altogether on his field. He plows the field before the rains, and right at the very start, of the rainy season, he plants all these 6 varieties of crops together, properly positioned, So amongst the 6 crops which he planted was cotton, 330 days, tuar, which is pigeon pea, 320-day life cycle from sowing to harvest, jawar millet, 160 days, gawar is cluster beans, 130-day cycle from sowing to harvest, bajri is pearl millet, 120-day cycle from sowing to harvest, mung, which is green gram, a 70-day cycle from sowing to harvest. And he's planted all these crops together. And this is the way he has planted them, So between 2 rows of cotton, there's a gap of 12 feet. Halfway between the two rows of cotton at 6 feet interval from each cotton is a line of tuer or pigeon pea. Then beside the tuer pigeon pea, he has the mung, he has the thing. So the spacings are well explained there. He has thoroughly planted the line. As soon as the rains come, and the seeds come up, within a few months, the whole soil is totally covered. It follows the principle of creating the microclimate for the soil, providing huge amount of biomass and providing yield for the farmer. So the first to harvest is your green gram. Within 70 days, you get your yield. Sorry. Yeah. So you get your yield in 70 days. Then pearl millet you get in 4 months. You harvest whatever you need to, and the residue goes back on the soil. The adjoining crops have more space and sunlight for it to spread further, and the soil is becoming richer with all the crop residues. So you harvested the mung, put the crop residue back. When you harvest the bajri after 120 days, put the crop residue back. Then you get your cluster beans, you harvest that, and you put the cluster back. Then you've got your jawar, you harvest that, put the residue back. So the farmer is getting something all through the year. And all through the year, the soil is also getting the crop residue back to the soil. Then your pigeon pea you harvest after 320 days. And then your cotton. So all around the year, this farmer who has tilled the land only once, who has never had to, he doesn't irrigate at all. It's a very low rainfall zone. It's a dry zone. There's humidity, but he says this works. This worked. I've seen it work. It worked under conditions which are organic. If a modern farmer tries to do this, it won't work. He says because when you do it organically, the organic life of the soil can absorb moisture and humidity directly from the air, and that is going to be needed. Our traditional farmers never used chemicals, and they were doing this intercropping, getting all the yield and plowing all the crop residues back, and the soil remained very rich and had a huge amount of this organic matter and ability to absorb humidity directly from the air. And so without irrigation in purely rain-fed conditions, in very low rainfall, dry areas, a 6 cropping system worked very well. And he said, I've seen it work with my own eyes. This is the chart for planting, or this is myself and Bhaskar Bhai. Yeah, this is Bhaskar Bhai receiving the One World Award for Lifetime Achievement from the International Federation of Organic Agriculture Movements. It's the worldwide body, umbrella body of organic agriculture in the world. And yeah, on the extreme left is Vandana Shiva. On the extreme second from the right is Dr. Hans Herren, who was the co-chair for the IASTD report, the big global report. Anyway, so this is that award ceremony. Yeah, on the left is Marcus Abens, the executive director of IFOAM, Bhaskar Save and me. Yeah, this is Larry Korn, a wonderful man. He's the one who translated Fukuoka's One Straw Revolution and carried it all over the world. I can't think of a single book on farming which has left such a positive influence all over the world compared to the One Straw Revolution, particularly Larry Korn's edition, which is translated and retranslated into so many languages. And this is him. He conducted a workshop on natural farming at Vanvadi. One day he spoke on the contribution of Fukuoka, and I spoke a bit on the contribution of Bhaskar Save. This incidentally was taken on Bhaskar Save's birthday. Okay. Yeah, these are the participants at the workshop which Larry Korn conducted. Yeah. Okay, so now I think we should go to Vanvadi. Yes.
Yes, please tell us a little bit about it.
Okay, yeah. So I met Bhaskar Save in 1988, and in early 1989, there was a national gathering on natural living and natural farming at a place called Bordi Hmm. Uh, about 5-10 kilometers, not 5-10, but more, 10-15 kilometers from Bhaskar Save's farm. Bhaskar Save's farm is just across the Maharashtra-Gujarat border, and Baldi is just on this side of the Maharashtra border. So there were 2 busloads of visitors to Bhaskar Save's farm to see the farm of this remarkable farmer. And I was there, and we made friends. And right from 1989, about 3-4 of us started looking for land to do organic horticulture, you know. And a big part of the inspiration was Bhaskar Save. But we looked for about 2, 3, 4 years. Some things almost happened, but perhaps luckily they didn't happen. And 4 years later, around 1994 to be precise, we came across this land, Vanvadi land. Uh, Most of the land had been clear felled just a year ago or 2 years ago. So it was regenerating. We could see the regeneration, but the vegetation was short. Only one could see the vigor of the thing, and that was understandable because that soil, undulating hilly terrain, it hadn't been cultivated for field crops. 70, 80 years, well, 100 years ago maybe, it was wonderful forest, with huge trees which may have taken, 2, 3 pairs of arms to encircle. And then we had the first wave of logging for timber during British times for the railways and the shipping and stuff like that. And then you had a second wave of logging again for timber. And then the cycles started coming down. The forest would regrow. You really didn't have to do anything. You cut your timber and then you left it and the forest would regrow. And then the cycle came down to 25 years. Then it came down to 10 years. And every 10, 12 years, they would cut the wood and make charcoal. And then that 10-year cycle of cutting came down to 4 years, where the only thing you can do with a 4-year cycle of cutting is firewood. But, the people from whom we bought the land, they lived in a village about 2 kilometers away. They had their own farmland. They were fairly well-off farmers. And so they could not really look after this land. They said they felt that if we don't cut it, someone else would cut it. So every 4 years, they would give a contract to someone and say, okay, how much are you paying me for this? And this would get cut. So that was the condition of the land, getting cut every 4 years when we bought it. And when we saw the land, we thought it would be a shame, if this continues, when you can see that the land is so good, there's vigor in the soil, no chemicals have been used, it hasn't been tilled much. Though it's been cut, it is growing back so nicely. So we thought we'd pass the word around and buy more land instead of buying, 10, 12 acres between 3, 4 of us. So we made some basic rules like environmental conservation should be our guiding principle, ecological audit. Our presence on the land should not harm, perhaps help. And so no use of chemicals, at least 50% tree cover, conservative use of water. Then other principles like fair dealings with local people, no buying of land for speculative gain. If you want to opt out, you don't sell at market price to an outsider. It goes back to within the group, things like that. And within 2 months, a group of 4 or 5 people became, more than 25. And we ended up buying 65 acres of land with the contributions of more than 2 dozen of us. And that was how we formed. And this photo was taken a few years ago. There are these women coming back after collecting water from the Vanvadi well. The Adivasi village is on a tableland above us. Their own well used to dry in March every year. It became Feb. In this particular year, in 2018, it dried in January. So already in winter, just imagine 4, 5, 6 months of trudging to get your water. especially when there's no electricity, and some of the bores there, they cannot pump up the water, then the open wells are a big blessing. So they would walk 2-3 kilometers to, 2 kilometers to our land, and we have an open well with a lot of water, and they'd fill the water and they come and take it up. Yeah, so now, before I go on to the forest and water and soil, a little bit about the biodiversity of Vanvadi forest.
If you can try and wrap up in the next 10 minutes or so, then there'll be some time for questions and discussion.
Yes, fine. So give me a reminder after another 5-7 minutes.
Yeah.
And I will wrap it up. Yeah. So Vanvadi forest, we with the help of local Adivasis, we listed the species growing, and this was 15 years ago, and we have more now. But already 15 years ago, we listed about 120 traditionally useful plant species, many of them tree species, growing on our land. And out of those 120 species, we had about 52 species which provided food, forest foods, humanly edible forest foods, which were not planted by man, which are not cultivated, which are free gifts of nature. We had more than 40 medicinal plant species. I cross-checked the data with the botanical names and documented information, and I found that at least 30 of those 45 species were there in the pharmacopoeia kind of documentation, and even the Western science were aware of the uses, not just the Adivasis and the Veds. For example, we have this plant which is called kuda. It has a lovely flower like the jasmine, and it's called kuda. Its pods are eaten. They're very good for the digestive system. And the botanical name of the plant is Holorina antidysenterica. So it is a wonderful medicine for stomach disturbances, dysentery, diarrhea. The Adivasis use it in different ways. They don't go around powdering the roots, but they take the pods, the vegetables. So that there is a wealth of species which the Adivasis recognize the medicinal value. Most of them are food species, and it goes back to the Hippocrates thing that let food be thy medicine, So they had a huge diversity of food, and they knew what food to consume under what conditions and when, and yeah. So that is the biodiversity of the forest. Over 25 years, it's become a lush forest with more than 90-95% tree cover, barring the water bodies and the pathways and a little bit of our house and land. All the land is the trees take over, and it gives all this diverse yield, but the ecological services it performs are incredible and far more precious, and we lose sight of it, and it's our stupidity that we lose sight of it. There is no greater efficient system than the forest to harvest the sunlight. The sun is a recurring source of energy. Every day it gives you energy. And every day the plants grow through photosynthesis, storing some of that energy. It is nature's battery storing that thing in the plant, the dry leaves. If the dry leaves fall into the ground, the branches fall to the ground, you light a fire, and that's your fuel. It's burst out into flames. All that energy is captured there. And the energy which we have been mining from the earth, our coal, our kerosene, our naphtha, our diesel, our oil, everything is harvested from the sun. It was primarily created by photosynthesis, by nature, buried as semi-decomposed matter for thousands and thousands of years, millions of years, not even thousands, and just a few generations think it's got a vital source of energy, and we've been mining it like nobody's business, creating, global warming, and it's a non-renewable resource. So the nature is doing the harvesting of the energy. All the photosynthesis, the biomass which is creating, is going back to the soil. It is creating rich soil in a forest ecosystem. I mean, some say that it takes so many 100 years to create 1 inch of topsoil or whatever, but it has all the nutrients you need, And if you take care of your system and you don't do too much of clear felling, you won't have your so much of leaching away of nutrients, and especially if you have small, little some contour bunds, trenches, a little bit of very simple basic earthworms, 1 or 2 check dams, so that your soil nutrients don't get drained out, and even under heavy monsoon showers, you are able to arrest and recycle them. Yeah, so it creates soil, it harvests energy, it absorbs water, because the soil is full of organic life, you know. Even before the rains, ours is a deciduous forest, so leaf shed is there. But if you walk around even that dry thing and just look under the leaves, you can see, vermicastings there. So it is full of these creatures. It's high fertility, high porosity. The porosity is critical for absorbing moisture as well, rain as well. It will provide aeration in the soil, but during rainfall, it allows it like a sponge to soak in all the rainwater, and it's by gravitational flow, it'll go lower and lower down till it reaches the rock shelf, And so this is how our groundwater is recharged. The groundwater is what we draw from our wells and our bore wells, and this is nature's system, the forests and a porous soil, with all the leaf litter, huge amount of roots and fibers, and yeah. So that is the water part of it. So
another 5 minutes or so.
Okay, fine, yeah. I'll quickly go through 2-3 more slides and wrap up in 5 minutes, then we go to questions and answers. At one point of time, Bhaskar Save received a letter from a central government committee appointed to review the Sardar Sarovar Dam, that huge dam which is very controversial. So the chairman of the committee, Dr. Jain, asked him, as a well-respected, vastly experienced farmer, what do you think about it from a farmer's perspective in terms of irrigation needs? So he wrote back a long 6-7 page letter, which I wrote in English based on a discussion with him in Gujarati. And he says that most farms consume huge amounts of soil, water, especially monocultural farms using chemicals. He says, my farm is a net supplier of water to the ecosystem of the region. Why? How? So this is the same as in a natural forest, Who irrigates the forest? Nobody's gone there to irrigate the forest, but the forest is harvesting that water. It is doing your groundwater recharge. It is soaking in that water. So he says, my orchard is like a food forest. It is a planted food forest, no doubt. But, it is soaking in all that moisture and recharging the groundwater. So he wrote in that same letter, he says that more than all the, small, big and medium irrigation schemes planned by the government, whether already existing or still on paper, far many times more than that is the capacity of the soil to absorb and soak water. And this is what we are neglecting. And this is free harvesting of water, decentralized water. There are no evaporation losses. And this is what provided abundant water to farmers all over India. At the time of independence, we had many times more groundwater, much closer to the ground than we have now. But we have ruined all that. We have cut down a lot of our forests. We have converted to chemical farming. Groundwater, like in a bank account, you keep on drawing money from the bank and don't put anything in, you become bankrupt. if you keep on drawing out water and you don't recharge water, the water level will fall from 60, 80, 100, more than 1,000 feet, more than 1,500 feet, 2,000 feet. These are the kinds of mind-boggling figures. And Bhaskar Save said, I went to Gujarat, the water they pumped out was warm, it was salty, this is water which fell as rain hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So, in one generation, maybe thousands of years ago, we have mined all that groundwater. So while we do rainwater harvesting with simple earthworks, more than that is the groundwater recharge being done by the forest. Our stream bed water harvesting is mainly by means of making small low check dams, about 3 to 4 feet in height or maximum 8 feet in height. And the undulating nature of the land means that just one wall we create and there's a lot of water held back for a long distance. And we deepen the reservoir of that water every summer when it is dried up. So the storage capacity increases. And when we deepen that, what we are also getting is we are desilting the thing, because this particular stream on the left comes from outside the land, and there's a lot of soil erosion taking precious soil and filling up the water bodies. So we desilt that, create more space for the water, reclaim that fertility, use on our plots without using heavy earth machines to level the land. We just put that soil and we are able to do terracing without any kind of tillage. So this is stream bed water harvesting in the community house. Yeah, this is tranquil, clear water in Vanvadi's oldest rainwater. All the water flowing into this pond comes only from our land. Whereas in this, on the left, you see a stream. This is bringing water from outside with a huge amount of soil erosion. When you get into a forested terrain, no soil, the rain is buffered, the soil is well bound by the roots, so no soil erosion happens and you get clear water. Yeah, this is again the main stream with our biggest dam. This dam is about 7-8 feet high and maybe about 30-40 feet long. This is the dam in spate in peak monsoon, and sometimes you can see the water is blood red because there's huge amount of soil erosion upstream. There's been clear felling of forests, and it's a man-made crisis. In summer, these people run into water scarcity, which should never happen. It's madness in a rainfall zone with 90 inches of rainfall. And we have water all around the year. We have abundant water. If we follow nature's way, there is no question of water scarcity. But if we follow the idiotic system of monetized economy, whereby cutting the trees and converting it into NA, you can sell at 10 times at a higher price, then you're providing a ridiculous incentive for people to mine your children's future. What are they going to do with that land? All that land is going to be useless if they don't take care of their water. And they're already having water problems in a water-rich area. Yeah. So this is a neighboring Clearfell plot. They called it Whispering Woods. After murdering the woods which we had protected there was a neighboring farmer who said, please protect our forest also while you're protecting yours. So we did that. His forest was as good as ours. And then he went and sold it to others, to outsiders who did this and made it into a moonscape. And the JCB digs out all the roots, so it's hilly area, undulating area, high rainfall. All the soil is going to run off. Your fertility is lost from where it is needed, and it's filling up the water bodies where it should not be. Okay, yeah. So we have a lot of wild foods. This is Bua. He's been working with us for 20 years. He's an Adivasi, very experienced. He is remarkable, and his family, So this particular plant is called Loth. You can say it is a kind of wild suran. It looks very much like a suran as well. Yeah. So the tuber is large. It's edible. So are the leaves. There's a special way of preparing it, to remove the itchiness. One of the most common ways of removing itchiness from some of the forest foods is keeping it overnight in the stream. So Bua would tell me that, his father survived, years of agricultural failure when even he had difficulties by on forest foods almost. And one of the kans he ate was kadukan, were available as much in abundance as this north can. So they would harvest it, wrap it in a cloth, and keep it in the stream, and it would take out the itchiness. And if the stream is not flowing, then you boil it with ash, and it will remove the itchy thing. So this is Bua's wife, Ambibai. She's the queen of forest foods. She's explaining how large the tube of north can get. Yeah, this is our cultivated patch, in Vanvadi, around our house, near our house. Here, the Adivasi women are planting, forest tubers within our cultivation zone. The kinds of foods they like very much. Uh, you know, yeah. So this is rice transplanting at Vanvadi. This is a forest food walk. So city people, they learn about forest foods, and Bua and Ambibai are the ones who take them around. This is one of the forest food gatherings. Uh, 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 the there must be more than 20 varieties of forest foods there, and people just talking and discussing and documenting. After this gathering, the following year, we had a forest food festival of the Konkan Western Ghats, where we had a lot more diversity on screen. We had groups coming from outside, including Bhima Shankar and Jabhar, and there were at least 4 or 5 groups, and it was quite a memorable occasion. And I may say, incidentally, that just yesterday I saw a wonderful webinar on uncultivated foods with by 3 friends of ours. Um, I'm going to be sharing one page of document of further resource material for articles, as well as some video films. So one of the links I've put up is the link to this webinar, and I highly recommend people read it. I found it a wonderful webinar, which each of the 3 speakers articulated vital issues so well. Yeah.
Bharat, can we pause now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good
Just
time.
in time.
Good timing.
Okay.
So thank you. This has been a wonderful presentation. I don't know where to begin. I mean, there's such a rich set of issues that you raised. But I think it's important to sort of go through some of the questions from the audience. I'll start with Aruna Rodriguez. She raises an important point. She says, if, as Save says, farming is not a business, does this mean that our farmers are consigned to a low income and level of living? Save had to plant coconut and chiku to raise a family. Many farmers don't have an equivalent option. So what future do we hold out for them?
See, this is in the current economic situation. If we ask the same question, about 70, 80 years ago, when more people farmed and grew their own food, the importance of earning for money, growing crops for money was less. And even now, when he says he himself sells his crops, but when he says don't look on it as a business, don't get carried away by your greed that that one year you want to optimize one particular crop which is giving you high yield. Uh, so you can do farming in harmony with nature. You should first grow for your own needs, and then you grow for the market. But if you follow a sustainable agroecological system as close to nature as possible, an organic system, uh, then that's the path to go. Yeah, it's true, and there's so many people living already in the cities. And they will need food to eat. So there, I'm sharing another document on the Swaraj, which looks at the macro picture for India, on food sovereignty and agroecological research, and co-authored with 2 experienced farmers and Kavita. So, yeah. So these look at the bigger issues, including better returns to the farmers. They've always got a very, very broad. It's very sad, you know. Yeah. So Aruna, I don't know. Has that answered your question?
I had a question as well about soil erosion. Have you used vetiver? This is something that Patanjali Jha had mentioned in a previous session.
Yes, I saw it and I like this talk very much. And vetiver is a wonderful plant. We haven't used much of it, but I'm sure it can be used. And especially in a system which has got degraded, it's a good idea to integrate it. It is a very deep roots, it binds it, you know. So yes, I would recommend, but I would say don't get into the trap of monoculture. Put in as much diversity as possible. Yeah, of course, he was not doing it monoculturally either. I liked his presentation. And he was also quite influenced by Bhaskar Save. He mentioned him halfway in that webinar. Yeah.
So some other technical questions here as well. Jyotsna asks, could you please tell us about staking of crops like tomatoes and gourds? Sorry, is it necessary?
Sorry?
Staking of, I'm not sure what that means exactly.
Providing support, is that what you mean?
Yeah, I think that might be the. Is it necessary?
There is it depends on your conditions. If you're exposed to very strong wind and rain, some plants are vulnerable. So if you find that it is necessary and it is falling over, then you do it. If you find that it is not falling over, then don't do it.
And Varshita has another question. What is the best way to add green and brown biomass to the soil, depending on the plants, weather, etc.? What is the interaction between biomass and microbes? Does in-situ composting increase heat in the soil, which cannot be tolerated by plants? And how does that? So lots of questions around.
No, true. These are important questions, and one also needs to look at a bit at the finer points. It is true that when organic matter decomposes, it will generate heat in the soil. So if you try to create organic fertility conditions, provided very close to the farming cycle, you can do damage. You never provide, say, for example, fresh cow dung, to your plants. It has to be dried and composted, because if you provide fresh cow dung, though it's a manure, to your plants, it will generate heat and will burn the plants. So you have to let it get composted. And if you do planned advanced planning, for example, you are deciding that this is the zone you want to plant. There's already so much of weeds, and the soil. You can cut and mulch the seeds. You can create, put soil on it, create beds, and do planting a little later down the line. So you don't have the problem of heat being generated from fresh or organic matter. A lot of it is dried, it's slowly decomposing already. So you don't then, in those conditions, have the problem of heat generation in the process of composting, harming the plants. I have not looked at the question in, is there any part of the question which I have not answered?
I think that question is all right. There's another question relating to Vanvadi, and it's about the other than earthworks for water conservation. What else have you done? Any other major change?
Earthworks?
Yeah, meaning
earthworks. Earthworms is one thing and earthworks is another thing. No, earthworms do a greater role than
and things like that.
The earthworms have done far more than our earthworks, I should confess, The earthworks, essentially, what the main earthwork which we have done are small check dams. There is scope for doing a bit more of these earthworks in terms of contour swellings and trenches. It is less needed on our land because we have a high density of vegetative growth. And so there are enough barriers to the flow of the water, and we don't have soil erosion happening. But I am sure at certain intervals, if we did integrate some contour swaling and trenching, it would help. Some places we need to put in gully plugs so that our fertile topsoil doesn't run out beyond our land. There's at least one part of our land in a very steep zone which we have neglected. I think we need to put in a gully plug there urgently. Uh, yes, at least before the next monsoon now. Yeah. So what other earthworks? No, not too much of earthworks. A little bit of contour bunding and check dams. Before we got onto or around the time we got onto the land, and even 5-10 years ago, there was the Soil and Water Conservation Department of the government, which came and did some free work on our land, which was making some contour bunding, some bunding on runoff points and some gully plugs. They did a decent job. I think they appreciated that what we were doing. So that was the last of that kind of work we did. Yeah, not much other by way of earthworks.
There's also a question about mulching. Mulching should be done in thin layers, is it? Sandeep is asking. Mulch of leaves shouldn't exceed 4 to 6 inches. And he's also recommending that you do a TED talk.
Oh no, he's asking if I've given. Okay, I don't think he'll ask me anyway. Okay, so yeah, 4 to 6 inches. Yes, now 4 to 6 inches is a good thing. Now, one normally doesn't think too much about this 4 to 6 inches, about it being too much or too little. But if you have a situation of weed rampancy, and you want to control the weeds, then Bhaskar Save recommends that your mulching should be at least 4 to 6 inches thick. In nature, it may not be like that, and we don't really do too much of mulching at all in the forest. It's all in-situ mulching. Even in Bhaskar Save's food forest orchard system, by and large, it is in-situ mulching of leaves getting composted and mulched exactly where they fall. Maybe just a little bit of minor shifting around. And yes, it does. I've seen on Bhaskar Save's farm that his layers of coconut leaves are sometimes more than 1 or 2 feet thick, because there's so much of coconut leaves. So I don't think there's any harm if the mulch is more than 4 to 6 inches. Of course, there's a lot of variation. If it is thin leafy mulch and it's not going to get compacted. So I really don't see any problem. Yeah. But I have, I think, Bhaskar Bhai's grandson and his family, Abhijay Save, may be on the talk. And we can always get them into answering any questions because they know more than me, without doubt, far more.
Bharat, there's a question about the best reference book for doing natural farming in India.
There aren't many books on natural farming, and there are very few books on natural farming in India, You have Fukuoka's book, which is written in a temperate country, Japan, different conditions, more on field crops. On natural farming, you have books by Bhaskar Save, and you have books by someone who considered Bhaskar Save his guru at one point of time. Probably, I don't know, in his heart he still does, who's been writing books under the name of Zero Budget Natural Farming and Subhash Palekar Natural Farming. So he has some books. Yeah, he calls it natural farming, and he is very much he derides organic farming as worse than atom bomb. But in truth, what he practices is organic farming. It is not do nothing, minimum interference, no-till natural farming. It is actually organic farming with agronomic practices. There are many useful things to learn. It is wonderful that he's taking farmers away from chemicals. We would be very happy, if the non-chemical, sustainable, agroecological, natural, organic farming movement gets better organized, including permaculture. We share each other's stuff. But in terms of available literature on natural farming in India, right now, yeah, there's my book, which is actually Bhaskar Save's book. I've just tried to write what I've learned from him. But it's a good book, I think, The Vision of Natural Farming.
We'll put a link to that as well on the YouTube site. There are a couple more questions, and then we should end. because we're getting close to 6 o'clock. One person, Ram Babu, is asking the Surya Mandal model that in coconut plantations, which Bhaskar Save has recommended. Is that suitable to all states, including Telangana and Andhra Pradesh?
Yeah. It is Surya Mandal, so it is the sun mandala. First of all, coconut may not be the best crop for all conditions. It is a crop which needs some irrigation, so you must have irrigation facility on your land. If you have no irrigation facility, it's a low rainfall zone, then coconut itself should not be among your the crops which you plant. You should plant a crop which requires less irrigation, things like mango, pear, amla, whatever else, but not things like coconut or chiku, which both require some amount of continuing irrigation. And Surya Mandal has its advantages. If these crops grow, then Surya Mandal can be grown, can be cultivated. It can be grown only with coconuts, with this kind of, it's a circular planting where the normal interplanting distance between coconut may be kept at 25 feet or 30 feet. But here they are planted in a circle, and the distance between two plants is sometimes just 9 feet or 12 feet, But because the coconut has a flexible stem, as it grows up, it bends outwards, So it is harvesting, all the sunlight it needs. And while the area of tending is much smaller, right between in the central pit, you can provide all the mineral nutrients and all the, moisture requirement. And it has certain advantages. One has to be careful not to plant it too close. The first experiment that Bhaskar Bhai himself did with the Surya Mandal on Ashok Bhai Sangvi's farm, he felt that he had planted the coconuts a little too close, and it would have been better to have planted them, a little further away. Yeah. So Surya Mandal, yeah.
So we'll take just one last question, which is has to do with the irrigation trenches. Are those used are they mulched as well, and are they used as pathways for harvesting and so on? So
yes, they can be mulched, on the edges of the irrigation trenches, or even in them. You can mulch them, because as the organic matter, the mulch decomposes under the action of the soil creatures. It will get absorbed by the moisture, and through that it will be taken up by the root systems of the plant. The roots will not take it in a solid form. All the mineral nutrients have to get dissolved in moisture, and then it has to be soaked in. So mulching in and around near trenches is good. Yeah, it's the buffet zone where the solids and liquids and everything is available for the plants.
So this has been a wonderful session, Bharat. Thank you so much. We're just so grateful to you to have agreed to do this, and you were overflowing with information and material. Unfortunately, we have.
So I would just tell for people who want to know more, there's a page of reference material which I have shared, where you can get to know more details. As I said, this is an ocean, and at Bhaskar Save's farm, they have these short 5-6 day introductory courses, and you can attend those courses. You can read more, learn from more. One should not have dogma about names and this thing. There's a lot to learn from each other, and a lot to learn from traditional farmers as well, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.